Sabrina is a composite figure, but she tells us something of why women were good candidates for the first workforce, despite the moral injunction to care for the home. Women did not, first of all, own their own labor. The doctrine of possessive individualism applied to men only. The labor of women and children belonged to husbands and fathers. Men not only owned their wives' bodies and those of their children, but they also owned the labor that those wives and children might sell or rent. Thus, the wages of a married woman who earned might well be paid to her husband. Those of a single woman might go to her, but whether her earnings went to her or to her father, she had an obligation to contribute to parental support as needed. Through given-out labor or cottage industries, women had already begun to engage in paid labor in their own homes. Though at first they worked at their own pace, selling the excess product of their looms and spinning wheels, by the early 19th century, many women were taking in work assigned by a factor or distributor who asked that it be completed to his specifications at a certain time. Wages depended on successful completion. By the early 1820s, many women would have learned how to pay attention to the clock and to follow the instructions of a supervisor. This would make them good employees. Unlike male artisans who tended to work on their own, women were already practiced in obedience. The transition to a factory, for them, where their work could be supervised more efficiently, would be easier on females than on males. There was another reason for women's attraction to the factory labor force. Young women grew less necessary in the rural New England environment as the 19th century progressed. The size of households declined as farms became less productive and new machinery reduced the need for labor. A lower birth rate and fewer young siblings meant that older daughters could more easily leave their mothers to run the household, and families needed cash to purchase manufactured goods and machinery or to help pay off mortgages. An unmarried daughter could bring in the necessary income. The household head, who possessed a craft, like boot and shoemaking, for example, discovered that his work diminished as crafts moved from custom manufacture to the commercial market. The boot and shoemaker, who might once have employed his wife and daughters to finish the boots and sew the uppers, gave up his workshop and moved to a factory that would hire large numbers of unskilled female workers to do most of the shoemaking processes. Federalists who favored the transition to manufactures also encouraged the use of women. Alexander Hamilton described the employment of such women as a favor to them. It was, he thought, merely the employment of persons who would otherwise be idle. His friend Matthew Carey, a Philadelphia entrepreneur, popularized this argument in 1820. Farmers, Carey observed, were no longer self-sufficient. They were as dependent on manufactured goods as city dwellers were on the products of the soil. The two should therefore work together. Wives and children of farmers should, and I'm quoting here, gather up fragments of time which would otherwise have been inevitably lost. There you see women using only lost time. Together, the farmer on the land and women in the factory could move forward, and so with the nation. So we have, for example, a Philadelphia newspaper commenting in the early part of the 1830s that without factory employment, women's labor at home would be inert and unproductive. Putting women's labor to work in a factory, therefore, could be done at minimal cost and would be counted a social good. For all these reasons, Sabrina and thousands like her persuaded herself to make the move to a factory. By the time she arrived at Lowell in the late 1820s, the mills were humming along.